No one in town thought much about the old diner that stayed open later than everyone else. But before sunrise on one bitter Montana morning, a line of black SUVs rolled silently into its empty parking lot. Inside, a little girl who had spent the night sleeping beneath a faded blue blanket refused to let go of the hand of the man who had given her nothing more than a warm meal, a safe booth, and the kindness she thought no longer existed. Moments later, an elegant woman stepped through the door with tears already in her eyes. She wasn't there for breakfast. She was searching for her missing daughter. What happened inside that small diner would change every life in the room forever. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories about ordinary people whose small acts of kindness create extraordinary change, be sure to subscribe. Now, let's begin. By 10 o'clock, the last customer had gone home. The neon sign outside Brooks' family diner buzzed softly against the cold Montana night, while Ethan Brooks wiped the counter one final time. The smell of fresh coffee still lingered in the air, mixing with cinnamon and baked bread. It was the same scent that had greeted travelers for nearly 30 years, long before the diner belonged to him. Lucy sat in booth 3 with a coloring book spread across the table. "Dad," she said without looking up, "your pine tree has a crooked trunk again." Ethan glanced at the chipped coffee mug in his hand and laughed quietly. "It always has. You could buy a new one." "I could, but you won't." "Nope." Lucy smiled. "Mom liked that mug." Ethan's smile faded, but only for a second. "She sure did." He placed the mug on the drying rack and reached into his pocket, pulling out an old silver pocket watch. The scratched cover caught the yellow light above the counter. It had belonged to his father, who used to remind him that closing a diner wasn't about locking the doors. It was about making sure no one was left hungry. The watch read 10:17. "Ready to head home?" Ethan asked. Lucy packed away her crayons. "Can I grab my jacket from the office?" "You know where it is." She disappeared into the hallway. Outside, the wind rattled the metal trash cans behind the building. Then came another sound, a soft scrape, barely noticeable. Ethan frowned. Probably a stray dog. He unlocked the back door and stepped into the freezing air. The alley sat in deep shadow. Rain from earlier had turned the pavement slick, reflecting the pale security light mounted above the dumpster. "Easy there," Ethan called. "I'm not here to chase anybody off." Silence. Then a small figure slowly emerged from behind the dumpster. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her oversized gray hoodie hung almost to her knees. Damp strands of brown hair clung to her cheeks, and her sneakers looked soaked through. She hugged herself tightly, trying to stop shivering. Ethan stayed where he was. "Hey." The girl didn't answer. "My name's Ethan." "Still nothing. Are you hurt?" She gave the smallest shake of her head. "Hungry?" After several long seconds, she nodded once. That was enough. "Come inside." She hesitated. "I won't make you do anything you don't want to do." Her eyes searched his face, as if weighing every word. Finally, she followed him through the back door. Warm air wrapped around her almost immediately. Lucy stepped out of the office carrying her coat and froze. "Dad." "It's okay," Ethan said gently. "Let's warm her up first." Without asking permission, Lucy hurried to the storage shelf and pulled down an old blue knitted blanket. "My grandma made this," she said softly to the girl. "It's really warm." The girl stared at it. You can use it. Slowly, almost afraid it might disappear. She accepted the blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Color returned to her face, little by little. Ethan poured hot chocolate into the pine tree mug, then stopped. Too hot. Instead, he found a paper cup, added extra milk, and slid it across the counter beside a grilled cheese sandwich. The little girl whispered her first words. "Thank you." Her voice was barely louder than the humming refrigerator. Lucy smiled. "I'm Lucy." The girl looked at her for a long moment. Emma. Only Emma. No last name." As she reached for the sandwich, the sleeve of her hoodie slipped back just enough for Ethan to notice something unexpected. Around her neck hung a delicate silver compass pendant. It wasn't flashy, but it was real silver, finely crafted, and far too valuable for a child who looked as though she'd spent the night outside. Ethan looked away before she noticed him staring. Questions could wait. Right now, she needed food more than answers. Outside, the wind grew stronger. Far down the empty street, a pair of headlights appeared, then another. Neither Ethan nor Lucy noticed them. But Emma did. Her fingers tightened around the warm paper cup. The color drained from her face. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of whoever might be coming with the morning. The headlights disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. Emma let out a slow breath, but she didn't unclench her hands. Ethan noticed. "You know those people." Emma lowered her eyes. "I don't know." It wasn't an answer. It was an escape. He didn't press. Instead, he carried a small space heater from the office and plugged it in beside booth 3. Warm air drifted across the blue blanket, making Emma pull it closer around herself. Lucy climbed into the booth across from her. "I like drawing before bed," she said, opening her coloring book again. "It helps when my brain won't slow down." Emma watched silently. Lucy tore out a blank page and slid a handful of crayons across the table. "You don't have to be good at it." After a moment, Emma picked up the blue crayon. She drew mountains, then a little cabin. Then she stopped. Her hand hovered over the page before she quietly colored the sky black. Ethan pretended not to notice. Some pictures said more than words ever could. He walked into the kitchen and opened an old wooden recipe box. Tucked inside was a worn recipe card with faded handwriting. "Cinnamon pancakes, Hannah." His late wife's handwriting curled gently across the card. "Whenever Lucy had a hard day, he made those pancakes." Tonight, they felt right. Soon the smell of butter and cinnamon filled the diner. Lucy grinned. "I knew it." "You always know. You only make pancakes this late when somebody needs cheering up." Ethan smiled to himself. "Guess I'm predictable." Emma looked toward the kitchen. "I've never smelled anything like that." "You've never had cinnamon pancakes?" Lucy asked. Emma shook her head. "No." A few minutes later, Ethan placed 3 plates on the table. Steam curled into the warm light above them. Emma stared at the stack in front of her. "Go ahead," Ethan said. She carefully cut off the smallest bite imaginable. The moment she tasted it, her eyes widened. Lucy giggled. "That's the face everyone makes." Emma took another bite. Then another. For the first time that night, she almost looked like an ordinary little girl instead of someone carrying the weight of the world. By midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with her. Lucy had already fallen asleep with her head resting against the booth. Emma lay beneath the blue blanket, still wearing the silver compass around her neck. Ethan turned off most of the lights, leaving only the lamps above the counter, glowing softly. Outside, snowflakes had begun drifting through the darkness. The diner became quiet. Too quiet! A sharp cry shattered the silence. No. Emma sat upright, breathing hard. Her eyes darted around the room. "But they're coming!" Ethan hurried over. "Emma." She flinched. "It's okay." Her breathing stayed fast. "I couldn't find." She stopped speaking. Couldn't find who or what. He knelt beside the booth without touching her. "You're safe here." Emma squeezed the blanket until her knuckles turned white. Then, without realizing it, she whispered something under her breath. "Ne me laisse pas." The words were soft, instinctive, not English. Ethan frowned. Lucy, now awake, blinked sleepily. What did she say? "I don't know." Emma covered her mouth as though she hadn't meant to speak at all. A few minutes later, she drifted back to sleep. Ethan remained awake. He looked toward the frosted windows, then toward the little silver compass, resting against Emma's blanket. Nothing about this child fit together. And somewhere beyond the quiet streets of Bozeman, someone was almost certainly searching for her. Just then, faint beams of light swept across the diner windows. Flashlights. Someone was outside. The beams of light moved slowly across the front windows, then disappeared. Ethan stood still, listening. One vehicle door closed. Then another. No shouting. No pounding on the glass. Just quiet footsteps crunching over the thin layer of fresh snow. Lucy rubbed her eyes. Who's out there?" "I don't know," Ethan answered honestly. Emma had gone completely still. Her small hands gripped the edge of the blue blanket so tightly that her fingers trembled. "But they found me." The words barely escaped her lips. Ethan crouched beside the booth. "Emma, look at me." She hesitated before raising her eyes. "No one's taking you anywhere until we understand what's going on." She searched his face as if deciding whether to believe him. A gentle knock came at the front door. Not the impatient knock of someone demanding entry. Just 3 calm taps. Ethan walked toward the entrance. Outside stood a tall man in a dark winter coat. Behind him, several people waited near a row of black SUVs parked quietly along the curb. The man held up both empty hands. "My name is Daniel Ruiz," he said through the glass. "We're looking for a little girl." Ethan unlocked the door, but kept it only halfway open. "What kind of trouble is she in?" Daniel shook his head. "She isn't in trouble." He glanced toward the diner windows before lowering his voice. Her mother has been searching all night." Before Ethan could answer, another figure stepped forward. A woman. She wore a long camel-colored coat over simple jeans and winter boots. There was nothing flashy about her, but everything about the way she carried herself suggested confidence worn thin by exhaustion. Dark circles framed her eyes. Her hair had been pulled back in a hurry. She looked less like a powerful executive and more like someone who hadn't stopped crying. "I'm Claire," she said quietly. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm Emma's mother." Inside the diner, Emma peeked around the corner. The moment Claire saw her, she stopped breathing. "Emma!" Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. She took one cautious step forward. "I've been so scared." Emma didn't move. Claire looked at Ethan. "Please." Ethan glanced back at the little girl. "Emma." For several long seconds, no one spoke. Then Emma slowly walked across the diner. Her footsteps echoed against the worn wooden floor. Claire dropped to one knee. The little girl rushed forward. For one heartbreaking moment, mother and daughter wrapped their arms around each other. Claire buried her face in Emma's hair. "Oh, thank God!" She whispered the words over and over. "I thought I'd lost you." Ethan felt Lucy slip her hand into his. Neither of them looked away. But as Claire held her daughter close, something changed. Emma's body became stiff. Her arms loosened. She slowly stepped backward until the hug broke apart. Claire blinked in confusion. "What is it, sweetheart?" Emma looked down at the floor. Snow melted from the bottoms of her shoes, leaving tiny puddles beneath her feet. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely louder than the ticking of the old pocket watch in Ethan's pocket. "I don't." She swallowed hard. "I don't want to go home." The words landed harder than anyone expected. Daniel lowered his eyes. Even the members of the security team looked away. Claire remained frozen where she knelt, her hands still reaching toward the daughter who had just taken another step back. Outside, dawn slowly painted the Montana sky with the first pale streaks of blue. Inside the little diner, warmth suddenly felt very far away. No one moved for several seconds. The only sound inside the diner was the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the wind brushing against the front windows. Claire slowly lowered her hands. She didn't argue. She didn't reach for Emma again. Instead, she took a careful breath. "I understand why you said that." Emma stared at the floor. "You do?" "No," Claire admitted softly. "Not completely. But I want to." The honesty caught Ethan by surprise. Claire looked toward him. "May I sit down?" He nodded toward booth 3. She chose the seat across from Emma instead of beside her. The distance seemed to matter. Daniel quietly guided the rest of the security team back outside, leaving the diner peaceful again. Lucy slid a fresh mug of coffee toward Claire. "The mug's chipped," she said with a shy smile, "but the coffee's good." For the first time all night, the corners of Claire's mouth lifted. "I've learned that the best things usually have a few cracks." She wrapped both hands around the warm mug before speaking again. "When Emma's father died 3 years ago, everything changed." Emma's eyes remained lowered. "I thought if I could keep our company strong, if I could protect what he built, then I'd be protecting her too." She gave a tired laugh that held no joy. "I measured my days by meetings, flights, and reports. I kept telling myself that when things settled down, I'd spend more time with my daughter." She looked directly at Emma. But somehow, later kept moving. Emma's voice was almost a whisper. "You were always leaving." Claire nodded. "I know. There was always another trip." "I know. You missed my school play." Claire closed her eyes. "I know. You forgot Dad's birthday." Silence settled over the booth. Ethan looked away, giving them the privacy they deserved. After a long moment, Claire spoke again. "When my board suggested an international boarding school, they said it would give you stability." Emma's head snapped up. "You already packed my room." Claire inhaled sharply. "I packed because I thought I was helping." "You never asked me." The words were simple. They hurt anyway. Lucy quietly closed her coloring book. She looked at Claire with the innocent honesty only a child could carry. "My dad asks me what I want, even when he already knows the answer." Claire turned toward her. Lucy shrugged. "Sometimes grown-ups think they're listening, but they're really just making plans." The booth fell silent again. Ethan reached into his pocket and checked his father's old watch. Its steady ticking seemed louder than before. His father used to say that time didn't disappear all at once. It slipped away one ordinary day at a time. Claire stared into the coffee. "I spent years trying to give Emma every opportunity." Emma answered without anger. "I just wanted breakfast with my mom." No one knew what to say after that. The smell of cinnamon still lingered from the pancakes Ethan had made hours earlier. It filled the quiet spaces between them like a memory that refused to leave. Then flashing red and blue lights reflected across the diner windows. A patrol car rolled slowly into the parking lot. Another followed behind it. Daniel stepped back inside, his expression calm but serious. "The Bozeman police are here," he said gently. "They'd like to speak with everyone." The police officers stayed inside the diner for nearly 40 minutes. They spoke with Ethan first, then Claire, and finally Emma. Their questions were gentle, never rushed. Daniel provided the missing person report that had been filed the night before, while Claire answered every question without trying to use her status to speed things along. When it was over, one of the officers smiled at Emma. You did the right thing by finding a safe place." Emma glanced toward Ethan. "I knew he wouldn't yell." The officer looked at Ethan and gave a quiet nod. "Neither would I." Outside, the morning sun had finally broken through the clouds. Fresh snow covered the sidewalks, turning the little street into a bright ribbon of white. Before leaving, the senior officer spoke privately with Claire. "There are no concerns about Emma's physical safety with you," he said. "But after everything that's happened, I'd recommend taking today slowly." Claire thanked him. She watched the patrol cars pull away before turning back toward the diner. Then she surprised everyone. "Ethan," she said, "would you mind if we stayed a little longer?" He blinked. "I thought you'd want to head home." "I do." She looked through the window at Emma, who was sitting beside Lucy with a box of crayons between them. "But I don't think home is a place for her right now." Ethan followed her gaze. Inside, Lucy was teaching Emma how to draw a pine tree. "The trunk doesn't have to be straight," Lucy explained. "My dad says trees that survive storms usually grow a little crooked." Emma smiled as she copied the drawing. Claire watched quietly. "I've missed too many mornings." Ethan held the front door open as they walked back inside. "Then maybe don't miss this one." The breakfast rush began just after 8. Farmers in heavy jackets, a retired school teacher, 2 construction workers, and a young couple with a sleepy toddler filled the booths. No one recognized Claire. To them, she was simply another mother sharing breakfast with her daughter. She helped carry plates when Ethan became busy. She refilled syrup bottles after Lucy showed her where they were kept. When an elderly customer accidentally dropped his fork, Claire bent to pick it up before anyone else noticed. "Thank you, dear," the man said warmly. She smiled. "It was nothing." But somehow, it didn't feel like nothing. Emma watched her from across the room. Not with excitement, with cautious curiosity. Late that morning, the diner finally grew quiet again. Ethan stepped into the kitchen to wash dishes. As he reached for another plate, his stomach growled loudly. He ignored it. There were still bills to pay. Still groceries to stretch until next week. He quietly pushed the last 2 cinnamon pancakes onto a clean plate. "Lucy," he called, "these are yours!" She looked at the plate, then at him. "What about you?" "I'm not hungry." Claire happened to walk into the kitchen just in time to hear him. She noticed the nearly empty refrigerator. She noticed the unpaid invoices clipped beside the register. And she noticed Ethan quickly turning away before anyone could see that he'd skipped another meal. For the first time since arriving, Claire realized that the man who had sheltered her daughter through the night had done so while quietly sacrificing pieces of his own daily life. She said nothing, but she couldn't stop thinking about it. The lunch crowd came and went, leaving the diner unusually quiet. Sunlight poured through the front windows, catching tiny snowflakes that still clung to customers' boots by the door. Lucy and Emma had moved to the corner booth, where their drawings now covered nearly half the table. One picture showed two girls standing beside a diner. Another showed a mountain beneath a bright blue sky. For the first time, Emma had colored the sky blue instead of black. Ethan noticed. He smiled without saying a word. Claire stood beside the coffee machine, slowly drying one of the chipped pine tree mugs. "I've probably attended 1,000 business meetings," she said quietly. "I've never washed dishes in a diner." Ethan chuckled. "You're doing fine." "I'm slow." "So was I when I started." She looked around the room. "This place feels peaceful." "It isn't always." "No." He nodded toward the empty booths. "There are days I wonder if we'll make enough to keep the lights on." Claire glanced at the unpaid invoices still clipped near the register. "And yet you let a stranger sleep here." Ethan shrugged. "My wife used to say that kindness isn't something you schedule after life gets easier." He reached into his pocket and turned the old silver watch over in his hand. She believed people usually need help on inconvenient days. Claire lowered her eyes. "I kept waiting for a convenient time to be a better mother." Neither of them spoke for several moments. Across the room, Lucy was showing Emma how to fold a paper napkin into the shape of a bird. Emma laughed when it collapsed. The sound made Claire stop breathing for just a second. "I haven't heard that laugh in months." Ethan followed her gaze. "Kids don't stop laughing because they forget how." She looked at him. "They stop when they don't feel safe enough to." Claire swallowed hard. "My husband used to tell bedtime stories every night." She smiled sadly. "He could make pirates sound like poets." "What happened?" "A heart attack." The words came simply, but they carried years of weight. Emma was 5. Ethan nodded slowly. "Hannah died from cancer." Claire looked at him with quiet surprise. "So you've both been raising children alone." "Looks that way." Claire rested a hand on the counter. "I thought providing everything meant I was loving her. And now, I think I confused protecting her future with being present in her life." At the booth, Lucy suddenly grew serious. She leaned close to Emma and whispered, though not quietly enough, "Sometimes I still tell my mom about my day." Emma blinked. "You do?" Lucy nodded. "Before I go to sleep." Emma looked down at the silver compass hanging from her neck. "I still talk to my dad sometimes." "What do you say?" "I tell him, I hope he can still find me." Claire closed her eyes. A tear slipped silently down her cheek. Before she could wipe it away, her phone vibrated sharply on the counter. The screen lit up with a single name. "Board chair, Richard Hale." It rang once, twice, then again. Claire stared at it without answering. Daniel, who had been waiting quietly near the entrance, glanced toward the screen. His expression grew uneasy. "They'll keep calling," he said softly. Claire knew he was right. The company she'd spent years holding together was waiting for its leader. But only a few feet away sat the daughter who had spent years waiting for her mother. Claire let the phone ring until the screen went dark. For a moment, the diner was silent again. Then it rang a second time. Daniel glanced toward the display before quietly stepping closer. "It's the board," he said. "They're asking everyone to join an emergency meeting in 30 minutes. Claire didn't answer. She looked across the room instead. Emma and Lucy had built a tiny town out of sugar packets, jelly containers, and folded napkins. They were arguing over where to put the paper diner. "It has to be here," Lucy insisted. "Well, why?" "Because everybody needs somewhere warm." Emma thought for a second. Then she moved the little paper building to the center of their tiny town. Claire smiled sadly. She couldn't remember the last time she'd watched her daughter play without checking the time. Daniel lowered his voice. "If you don't attend, the board will make decisions without you." "I know. They're already worried about the market." "I know. The investors." Claire gently raised a hand. "Daniel." He stopped. "Well, when was the last time you took a full day off?" The question caught him off guard. "I honestly don't remember." "Neither do I." Daniel looked at Emma, then back at Claire. For the first time since he'd arrived in Bozeman, his professional posture softened. "I've worked for your family for 12 years, he said quietly. "I know. I've seen you fight through impossible situations." Claire nodded. "But I've never seen you look more afraid than you did this morning." She looked toward booth 3. "I almost lost my daughter." Daniel didn't argue, because they both knew she wasn't talking about the missing person report anymore. Claire picked up the phone. The screen showed 7 missed calls. Without opening a single message, she held the power button until it went black. Daniel watched her. "You turned it off." "For today." "What should I tell the board?" Claire drew a slow breath. "Tell them the truth." "And what's that?" She looked toward Emma again. "That their CEO is spending today with her daughter." Daniel studied her face for several seconds. Then, with the faintest smile, he slipped the phone into his own pocket. "I'll handle the rest." Across the room, Emma had noticed everything. She walked slowly toward her mother. "Were they calling because of work?" Claire nodded honestly. "Yes." "Are you leaving?" Claire knelt until they were eye level. "No." Emma searched her face. "They'll be mad." "Probably. You always go when they're mad." Claire felt every word like a stone in her chest. "I know." Emma waited. This time, Claire didn't promise that things would be different. Instead, she reached for a chair and pulled it beside the booth. Then she sat down. "I'm staying right here." Lucy smiled without saying anything. She simply handed Claire a red crayon. "We're making the park now." Claire accepted it. "I haven't colored in a very long time." "You'll remember," Lucy said. For the next hour, Claire never looked for her phone. She laughed when she colored outside the lines. She listened while Emma explained why every park needed at least one crooked tree. Outside, another light snow began to fall. Far away, in a glass office tower, hundreds of miles from Bozeman, stock prices flickered across giant screens as anxious board members waited for a CEO who never joined the meeting. Inside the little diner, Claire made the first decision in years that couldn't be measured on a financial report. By late afternoon, the diner had settled into its familiar rhythm. A delivery driver waved through the front window before heading back to his truck. Two high school students shared a basket of fries while studying for a history test. An elderly couple lingered over coffee, talking about the snowfall that was expected overnight. To everyone else, it was an ordinary day. To Claire, it felt like stepping into a life she had forgotten was possible. She stood behind the counter beside Ethan as he poured coffee into the old pine tree mug. "You remember who takes cream and who doesn't," she said. Ethan shrugged. "That they've been coming here for years. But you don't write anything down." "I don't have to." He nodded toward the elderly couple. "Frank always asks how Lucy's soccer team is doing." Claire looked over. Frank was already smiling at Lucy as she carried him a slice of pie. It wasn't just business. These people knew one another. They belonged to one another in quiet, ordinary ways. A bell above the front door jingled. A young mother stepped inside, carrying a sleepy little boy. "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. "He spilled juice all over himself before daycare. Could I borrow your restroom?" "Of course," Ethan answered without hesitation. As she hurried toward the hallway, the little boy reached for the cookie jar sitting on the counter. Ethan noticed. He leaned down. "Tell you what." The little boy looked up. "Hey, if you help me count the cookies after your mom comes back, I think one might accidentally disappear." The boy grinned. "It's okay if accidents happen. Sometimes the good ones do." Claire watched the exchange. No announcement. No performance. Just another small kindness folded naturally into the day. She turned toward booth 3. Emma and Lucy were finishing another picture together. This time, Emma had drawn 4 people standing outside the diner. Lucy pointed to one figure. "That's my dad." Emma nodded. "I know." "And that's me." Another nod. Lucy tilted her head. "Who's this?" Emma tapped the tallest figure. "My mom." Then she pointed to the 4th person. "Daniel." "He always looks serious," she whispered. The girls laughed. Daniel, standing near the entrance, looked over with puzzled curiosity. "What?" "Nothing," Emma answered quickly. "It's a secret." Claire hadn't heard her daughter laugh like that in a long time. The sound settled deep inside her. As the afternoon faded toward evening, Lucy reached for the faded blue blanket folded neatly beside the booth. She lifted it carefully and placed it across Claire's lap. Claire looked surprised. "I thought Emma might want it." Emma shook her head. "You keep it for a minute." "Why?" "Because..." Emma hesitated. "You looked cold this morning." Claire blinked. She hadn't realized anyone had noticed. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. It still carried the faint scent of fresh laundry and cinnamon. Warmth spread through her far beyond the wool itself. Just then, while gathering crayons from beneath the booth, Claire noticed a folded piece of paper tucked against the wall. She picked it up carefully. On the front, written in a child's neat handwriting, were 4 simple words. "For Mom, don't read yet." Claire frowned. It wasn't addressed to her. She looked toward Lucy. Lucy had gone into the kitchen with Ethan and hadn't seen the paper. Claire gently turned the folded note over in her hands, wondering why a child would hide a letter inside the very booth where strangers had become friends. Claire looked at the folded note for a long moment before carrying it into the kitchen. "Lucy," she said gently, "I think this belongs to you." Lucy turned from the sink, where she had been drying silverware beside Ethan. Her eyes widened. "Oh." She hurried over and carefully took the note. "I'm sorry. I forgot it was there." Claire smiled. You don't have to apologize. Lucy held the paper against her chest. I wrote it after my mom died. Neither Claire nor Ethan spoke. Lucy looked down at the faded fold lines. Sometimes I write her letters instead of talking out loud. It makes me feel like she still gets to hear about my day. Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. I understand. Lucy smiled softly. I think she would have liked you. The simple words caught Claire completely off guard. Before she could answer, Emma quietly slipped her hand into her mother's. It was the first time all day she had done so on her own. Claire looked down. Emma wasn't gripping tightly. She was simply holding on. A small beginning. That evening, after the last customers had gone home, Ethan began wiping down the grill. Claire stood beside him. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Ethan shook his head. You don't owe me anything. You opened your door to my daughter without knowing who she was. I knew enough. Claire looked puzzled. What do you mean? I knew she was cold. Nothing more needed to be said. Claire glanced toward Emma and Lucy, who were packing away the crayons. I've spent years trying to solve every problem with a calendar. She took a slow breath. Tomorrow I'm canceling the boarding school enrollment. Emma looked up so quickly that a crayon rolled off the table. Claire continued. I'm also changing my travel schedule. Daniel, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. The board won't like that. They don't have to. Claire smiled gently. They hired me to lead a company. She looked at Emma. They didn't hire me to stop being her mother. Emma searched her face carefully, as if testing whether those words would disappear by morning. You promise? Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked behind the counter, found Hannah's handwritten recipe card for cinnamon pancakes, and held it carefully between her fingers. Would it be all right if I copied this recipe someday? She asked Ethan. He smiled. Hannah believed good recipes should be shared. Claire nodded. Then every Saturday morning. She looked at Emma. I'll make these for breakfast. Emma's eyes filled with cautious hope. You'll really be there? Claire reached out her hand. One breakfast. She smiled. Then another. And another. Emma slowly placed her small hand into her mother's. Not because every wound had healed, because healing had finally begun. As dawn approached the following morning, pale golden light slipped through the diner windows. Emma touched the little silver compass hanging around her neck. It points north, she whispered. Ethan smiled. Sometimes. Emma looked up at him. Well, what about the other times? He glanced at Claire, then back at the little girl. The other times, he said quietly. It reminds us that finding our way isn't about knowing the direction. It's about knowing who walks beside us. Emma looked at her mother. Without saying a word, she kept holding Claire's hand as the first sunrise they had truly shared in years filled booth 3 with warm light. 6 weeks later, winter had settled comfortably over Bozeman. The Brooks family. Diner looked much the same from the outside. The old neon sign still buzzed when the sun went down. Booth 3 still sat beside the front window, catching the first light every morning. Only now, the faded blue blanket was neatly folded across the back of the booth. Lucy called it the welcome blanket. If someone came in cold, tired, or simply needing a quiet place to sit, she would carry it over without saying a word. It had become part of the diner, just like the smell of fresh coffee. Business slowly grew busier. Not because of advertisements. Not because anyone famous had visited. Neighbors simply kept returning. A rancher quietly fixed the loose railing by the front steps one afternoon. The retired school teacher brought a box of children's books for booth 3. Someone painted the old diner sign free of charge after closing one weekend. Nobody called it charity. It was gratitude finding its own language. One snowy Saturday morning, Claire and Emma walked through the front door, carrying a familiar aroma. Claire smiled as she lifted a covered dish. I hope I followed the recipe correctly. Ethan peeked inside. Cinnamon pancakes, made from Hannah's handwritten recipe. He laughed. I think she'd approve. Emma grinned. We've made them every Saturday. And who flips them now? Lucy asked. Emma pointed proudly toward her mother. She does. Claire raised both hands. I only burned the first batch. Everyone laughed. The sound filled the diner more warmly than the heaters ever could. As breakfast ended, Emma unclasped the little silver compass from around her neck. She placed it carefully in Ethan's hand. It stopped shining. Ethan turned it over beneath the light. It just needs a little care. Later that afternoon, he polished the silver until it caught the sunlight once again. When he returned it, Emma smiled. It looks new. No, Ethan said gently. It looks loved. Claire quietly watched the exchange. She understood exactly what he meant. Before leaving, she paused beside the register. There was no envelope. No business proposal. No oversized check. Instead, she reached for the chipped pine tree mug. I've been looking for one like this, she said. You won't find another, Ethan replied. It reminds me that beautiful things don't have to be perfect. She set it back exactly where it belonged. Outside, snow drifted softly across Main Street. Claire took Emma's hand. This time, Emma reached first. Inside the diner, Ethan slipped his father's old pocket watch from his coat and listened to its steady ticking. For years, he had wondered whether the small acts of kindness his father believed in still mattered. Now he knew. Not because anyone had thanked him. Not because the diner was a little busier. But because one frightened little girl had walked through his back door on the coldest night of the season. And walked out weeks later, believing that home could be rebuilt one ordinary morning at a time. As the front door closed, the tiny bell rang once. Ethan smiled toward booth 3, where the blue blanket still waited for the next stranger who might someday need warmth. Because kindness, like a good meal, was never meant to end with the first person who received it. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a small act of kindness that changed your life or been given a second chance when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. Your words may encourage someone who needs hope today. If you enjoyed spending time with Ethan, Lucy, Emma, and Claire, please leave a like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories about ordinary people whose compassion creates extraordinary change. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for watching, for listening, and for believing that kindness still has the power to bring people home. We'll see you in the next story.